Pizza was invented in Naples, Italy, and the pizza makers then and now use four ingredients and only four ingredients in their pizza dough: flour, water, yeast, and salt. The flour that they use in Italy and throughout all of Europe is milled differently than it is here in the US. They use what they call a 00 flour, which is milled very, very fine, more fine than any mill in America, at least traditionally. They also let the dough rise for a long time, at least 9 hours or so. And so the combination of the super finely milled flour and the long rise makes for very strong and lightweight crust. Now, when the old Italians immigrated to New York and other parts of America, they were unable to get the 00 flour. The stuff in America just was not milled as fine. And so they weren't able to get the same stretchy, strong, lightweight crust that they were in Italy. And so they learned that they had to add a protein, a fat to it. So they started to add lard, some kind of animal lard to it. And they found that this gave the crust the stretchiness and the strength it needed to make good pizza dough. Now, over time we don't use lard much anymore. So we replace that with olive oil. And a lot of New York pizzerias still follow that same recipe, just five ingredients: flour, oil, salt, yeast, and olive oil. However, some pizzerias also add sugar. Sugar does a couple things. It makes it rise faster, and it also gives the crust a little bit of color. And so adding sugar to the dough is very common. I've experimented with a little bit of both, but I've never really done side-by-side comparison until now. I'm going to put the exact measurements I use for these dough balls in the description if you'd like to take a look. Here, you'll see I've got three samples. In the blue bowl, it's five ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast, plus olive oil. Pink bowl has five ingredients, those four main ones, plus sugar. And then the green bowl has only the four ingredients. So we're going to compare these and see what happens. Everything in this dough is the same except for those different ingredients of oil or sugar. I mean, the water was exact temperature. All of the ingredients were measured by weight, very precise. They're all the exact same. The only thing different is the one has oil in it, one has sugar in it. So let's take a look. After a 4-hour rise, you'll notice that we have three different sizes. You see that the dough with the oil raised slower than sugar. But surprisingly, the dough that didn't have either oil or sugar raised the most. That kind of surprised me. I made my first pizza with the green dough, the one that only had the four ingredients. And when I was tossing it, the dough ripped on me. And it never does that. I mean, I haven't had dough rip on me for years. And so that tells me that this dough was simply not as stretchy as dough with the oil or sugar. Because recently I've been making a lot of pizza out of either oil or sugar or both, and I've never had a dough rip on me for many years. So that tells me that this dough without either oil or sugar just is not as stretchy nor as strong. And you'll also notice that the pie that I made out of this dough is smaller. So even though the dough ball was bigger than the other two, it didn't stretch out as much, and so the pizza is smaller. You'll notice that the crust has very little color to it. It's very white. And you can't really tell from the picture, but it was more dense. It was just heavier and more dense. We had a couple of larger air bubbles in there, but overall it was just not great crust. It was dense and didn't have good coloring, not great texture. Next, I did the dough in the pink bowl, the one with the sugar, and it was a lot more stretchy than the one with no sugar, the first one I did. So you notice that the crust has a lot of color on it. It has the most color out of the three. but there are no large air bubbles, which is fine. I mean, Coronet and other good pizzerias in New York have crust that looks like this. It's not my personal favorite though. So lastly, I did the dough with oil in it. And it's really interesting because you notice that out of the three, this was the smallest dough ball after the 4-hour rise, but it was the most stretchy, so it made the largest pie. Had nice color, not quite as much as the sugar one, but it was still good. And it had larger air bubbles in the rim of the crust. So I was kind of surprised by these results. I had no idea that the dough with no oil and no sugar would rise the most, and I didn't know it was going to be so weak that it would tear on me. I hope that you enjoyed following along with this experiment.